TJ's crazy hypotheticals? Pish posh, poppycock.
No.
Those shows are nothing more than the ramblings of a bona fide loon. It was I who should have had the idea for this style of episode, and I should have made the first foray into this topic. So I need you, viewers, to help me correct the record by exploring some important historical what-ifs. Tonight, Paul's perplexing potentialities. Get deep fat fried.
Deep fat fried.
Paul's perplexing potentialities, huh?
That's right. Move aside,
okay.
TJ's hypotheticals. Paul's perplexing potentialities is here to unseat you.
All right. Fair enough, I guess.
Let's get right into it. Let's not fucking tap around the bush here. This is a discussion-based episode, so your participation is required, gentlemen. I ask you a first question. I'll get a little into it, and then we'll dig into it. What if the indigenous population of North America had been able to push out the European settlers? So let's think about this. The invasion of North American continent and its peoples began with the Spanish in 1565 at St. Augustine, Florida. Then the British in 1587 when the Plymouth Company established a settlement that they dubbed Roanoke in present-day Virginia. This first settlement failed mysteriously, as watchers of the American Horror Story Roanoke would know.
Roanoke.
Kathy Bates went crazy and fucked all that shit up.
Yeah, she sure did. Thanks.
In 1606, and the London Company established a presence in what would become Jamestown, Virginia. After that, from there, the French founded Quebec, and on and on and on and on and on. And we all know the story of how the Indians were pushed off the continent. But what if when these first settlers had arrived, the Indians and indigenous peoples of Mexico and Central and South America, instead of receiving them with curiosity and wonder, had seen them coming and just ambushed them and killed every fucking person that showed up? So instead of Cortez coming back with tales of cities of gold and shit, Cortez just never came back. Neither did any of his men. This was, of course, totally possible. Didn't happen that way, but the Indians and indigenous peoples on this continent had the European settlers outnumbered by like 1,000,000 to 1, right? They could have done it. What if they had?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm not like some kind of historian or anything, but I guess that if they had done that, it would have probably taken a while before Europeans even realized that there was like this continent out here that was colonizable, or that there was this like other land, because every ship that had gone out that way would have just never come back. So it would have just been like, don't try that. No one ever comes back from that voyage.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And also think about the two-way flow of information that they would have. The native peoples would have all of these weapons and all of this technology that they seized from these killed soldiers, letting them know that there was this other group of people out there that meant them harm, probably causing them to accelerate their defensive capabilities. But none of that would ever have reached back to the European continent.
Right, that's true. Because they would have been like, they would have seen like all this armor and shit and been like, like obviously they have some armor and stuff, but like when they saw all those, and they would have had horses too. So, because like those motherfuckers brought horses over.
Well,
so.
Technologically they weren't as advanced. I mean, I get what you're saying. Maybe it could have spurred some sort of something like that. Honestly, a lot of stuff I've read has said that it might have been China or Japan that would actually end up colonizing the U.S. or the North American landscape.
I mean, I just kind of try and imagine like the Native Americans having a more xenophobic kind of approach rather than the curiosity that it seems is recorded in the journals of these early settlers and explorers and shit, right? So like Columbus writes about how, you know, half naked natives ran out onto the beach to watch him come ashore and presented him with all these gifts and shit. Like, what if those people had just hidden, waited for all the fucking Spaniards to come ashore, jumped out of the fucking jungle, killed them all, burned all their fucking ships, and stolen all their technology. And then the next time it happened, that same thing happened. And the next time it happened, that same thing happened, to the point where anybody that was sent on an expedition to this new continent just returned with no word.
I mean,
Meanwhile,
I feel like
over the couple hundred years it might have taken, Europe to finally send an expeditionary force of sufficient size to, North, South, and Central America, the indigenous populations have figured out, that kind of military technology that they stole and have prepared themselves defensively to fend off an attack.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like if they were exposed to that technology, I mean, they might even have captives that they could pump for information about this kind of stuff.
Well, we don't even know if they would have wanted to exploit it. But I mean, so you're making the assumption they would want to exploit it. Then, I mean, yeah, of course. I mean, that'd be like, what the fuck is this thing?
If we were tomorrow invaded by like a race of aliens or something, like a UFO lands, and we fucking kill the aliens, like we're gonna fucking look at their technology. We're gonna be like, look at what's on this UFO. Look at these ray guns and shit. We need to figure out how to make these ourselves because there's aliens out there. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like.
And think about this too. The central,
that'd be the mentality I would fucking take to it anyway.
The Southern Mexicans, Central American, and South American native populations, while, as Scotty pointed out, we're not as technologically advanced as Europeans, we're an incredibly advanced society in terms of societal structure, ritual, rich history, the ability to build amazing monuments that stand the test of time, etc.
Sure.
So it's interesting for me to think what the Maya Empire or the Aztec Empire would have done had Hernan Cortez and his men just been absolutely fucking destroyed. Unfortunately, what Cortez brought with him kind of precluded that as well. The Europeans, having some immunity to smallpox, brought it to the Native American populations who had no immunity to smallpox, and it ravaged the Aztec civilization.
Right, like a lot of what destroyed the Indians, Native Americans, whatever the fuck you want to call them, was really like that we brought all these fucking terrible diseases across the ocean.
Well, I mean, it was that coupled with a steady stream of technologically advanced invaders that just never stopped, right? So they could win. Obviously, one of the reasons
ravaged by pandemics and shit, you're already in a weakened position at that point.
It's not like the Indian people on the North American continent and in fucking Central and South America didn't try this here and there. There were tribes that met with immediate resistance when these boats would show up. There were tribes that, when a settlement would be put up, would attack it constantly, but they were just. By that time, a steady stream of people had started to come across the Atlantic.
Yeah, they got a foothold, so there was nothing they could really do. Yeah.
So, but take a look. I mean,
the Aztec Empire.
I mean, in order for them to adequately expand, they would have had to have a technological renaissance.
And by the way, this map here represents a kind of incomplete understanding of the reach of the Aztec Empire. Because as they explore the jungle at the southern reaches and southeastern reaches of this, they continue to find evidence that Aztec civilization and perhaps even like Olmec, I believe, or Toltec civilization existed in those areas as well. So areas that we previously thought were just kind of like uninhabited or sparsely habited jungles with little villages dotted around them have shown, as they've done these, I don't know what they use, but some kind of laser camera to see through the trees and see like geometric shapes. And they've been able to find the foundations of giant cities out there that we never knew existed. So, like this, had this empire been able to expel Hernan Cortez, or had the forethought to do so, and was able to quarantine off the few people that got sick from the soldiers and the fighting and not be subdued by smallpox, the fate of the North American nation could be North, South, and Central America can be completely different. Think about
it'd be vastly different. Yeah.
Think about these indigenous people spreading the word north and south that these metal-clad invaders are coming and that everyone needs to come together and at least come with a pact of mutual defense. And you have this kind of native movement of isolationism and protectionism that happens as a result of knowing that a well-armed, well-equipped, technologically superior enemy is coming, while simultaneously being able to pretty much deny that enemy of any counter intel, that there's any military buildup going on at all. You see what I'm saying? So like, it could have, the Aztec Empire could, like America could be habited by direct descendants of the Aztec Empire's culture rather than European culture.
Well, that's such a large area. They wouldn't even know where they're going to land. So they would have to go further than that. They'd have to actually build a navy of some kind to know what's going to happen around them.
Right. Like, there were Native American civilizations dotted all over the coastlines, all over North, South, and Central America. And so that's why I said, what if there was a campaign after a couple of these were pushed back to look, let's spread the word to the people that we know live down south and up north that these people are coming.
I'm saying that technology will also include those ships. Like, they keep some of these people alive. Like, how do these ships work? How do you build these?
Right. But they're going to see hey, it's possible to build something like this. You know what I mean? Like, just the exposure to this technology is going to open up a lot of they're not going to immediately have mastery of it, but over the course of a few generations, they're definitely going to adapt and be like, oh, okay, we see what this is.
What they'll probably do is invent their own sort of ship, but it'll be modeled after that ship. That's
right.
That's kind of what happened. Historically, if you look at it, it's like, okay, what did the Greeks do with these ships? So the Romans are going to take that ship and make a different ship that's better equipped to fight those ships, or whatever the fuck it is.
I mean, it's definitely going to have a profound impact on their culture.
And lest you think
smallpox stuff, I mean, it's going to be pretty difficult for them to control that. I think they're probably still going to be ravaged by that.
Right.
There's almost no way.
Because quarantining, I mean, that's pretty modern technique. We didn't really fucking have modern theory of disease back then. They're not just going to spontaneously
I would say,
that.
if you're looking at this time period, there's that knowledge is still probably at least 30 or 40 years away.
So they're probably not going to fucking do too well against the fucking disease. But look at it, how even something like COVID-19 has radicalized so many people in our culture. It's just going to radicalize these people further. And it's going to be this is the disease that these fucking white demons brought from across the fucking sea.
Right.
And why we need to be prepared to fucking kill them on sight.
Not only do they have weapons, the likes of which that we've never seen before in vessels that can traverse the great water, but they bring with them a pestilence, and we have to fucking prepare. Yep. And lest you think that the Aztec civilization might not have been capable of unifying or at least creating some kind of unification of the Native American world, before the Spanish victory over the Aztecs had a huge empire of tribes that had assimilated or conquered. So by the early 16th century, the Aztecs had come to rule over up to 500 small states and some 5 to 6 million people. So I'm thinking with a concentrated effort, they could have created a giant dominating American empire that possibly was able to catch up in some way technologically with Europeans and created a whole new paradigm on the planet.
Well, look, if you fucking expose that civilization to that technology, and the civilization that's already expanding vigorously,
and not to interrupt you, TJ, I want to let you finish the thought, but a civilization that without exposure to all of the Hellenistic and Greek mathematical advances had come up with that shit on their own. Make no bones about it. They were less advanced than Europeans, but the Aztec and civilization and the civilizations that came before it were very mathematically advanced, had the ability to make weapons, understood basic forging and shit and metalworking. Right. So it's
you just look at you look at the buildings they created, and it's obvious that there are no slouches in the civilization game.
That's some understanding of math, and
you expose them to that kind of shit. I mean, I don't know. They're already fucking ruthlessly expanding through conquest, right? We see that's they're the way of doing business. They go and they add to their empire through conquest. So they could have continue to do that. They might have the technology that Europeans exposed them to might have made them a lot better at that. I think they probably would have. Because now all of a sudden,
you're probably right.
I mean, especially if they seize the horses, if they slay the horses as demons or something,
They would have seized everything, you know what I mean, and studied it. They were smart people. They wouldn't have destroyed any technology that they had, you know what I mean?
So if they fucking, but they might like decide to like kill the horses because you just view them as a threat in that moment.
Maybe,
but I mean, if they kept them around, if
they saw those soldiers riding on the backs of these beasts, they probably wouldn't have killed those horses. They would have done their best to kill the fucking soldiers and save a couple of horses and breed them.
One of the things that gave the Spaniards such an advantage in the conflict was, well, of course, the Aztecs weren't even really prepared for a conflict, but the horses. The horse is a huge advantage in battle because it's just you're striking blows from above. You have a tremendous fucking leverage advantage
and speed.
It's terrifying to approach a horse. You're faster, so
you have the ability to flank a foot-based army with your speed and maneuverability on a horse. You have the ability to be like an almost unhittable moving target to the types of bow and arrows that were used in war at this time. It's just like a total advantage, right?
The Aztecs had never seen anything like a
force
horse
multiplier.
Yeah.
Right. It's like
a tremendous force multiplier.
It's like the tanks of this time. But anyway, interesting to think about. But gentlemen, we must move on to the next perplexing potentiality. And this one is pretty blunt. What if the United States had not invented the atom bomb and or just decided not to use it against Japan?
Ooh, man, that's tough. I mean, it's really difficult because the reason that was used to begin with is because it was believed that the invasion of mainland Japan would basically be like 1 million casualties
or more.
Right? The Japanese or more, because the Japanese were just going to fight so hard. Like they were going to fight. Like they were thinking like this might be like a Roman conquest where it's like they have to kill like a large percentage of the population before it'll be pacified.
The Japanese people. I mean, and I remember watching this. My favorite director, Akira Kurosawa, I was watching a documentary about his life, and he was talking about when he was a kid, and World War II was raging on and stuff, and after the 2 bombings, the Emperor came on the radio, and everyone was expecting that like he was going to announce that like we're all going to ritualistically kill ourselves now, like everyone in the country, kill yourself, like because that was like what was trained for in the population. That's what was expected culturally. That's why they had the kamikazes and stuff like that. It was like there was a very high sort of like thing placed on, it's better to die than accept defeat on any level. Like being taken prisoner is dishonorable. If you have it, you got to fight to your dying breath. And that's applied to the entirety of the culture, to the point where like they're all waiting for the Emperor to tell them to give the order. All right, guys, we had a good fight, but the fight's over. Kill yourselves. Everyone kill yourself. And they're all ready to do it. Entire families ready at a moment's notice. Kill yourself. The Emperor said kill ourselves. We got to do it. Now, obviously, not everyone's going to do it.
Sure.
But a huge amount of fucking Japanese people were ready to do that. Yeah, instead, the Emperor comes on and says, we're surrendering. And people are just like shocked. Like, what?
Talk about a fucking like a twist of a fucking event.
So everyone's ready with a knife,
Here's like, some more little kind of related questions to chew on. So, the Emperor of Japan during World War II was sentenced to death and was on trial for war crimes after he surrendered. But it quickly got pushed to the wayside by America as America was distracted by the Nuremberg trials and pushing back the previous ally, the Soviet Union, who, that immediately turned sour after the common enemy was defeated. With how quickly the tables turned against Russia, would the U.S. have been able to recruit them to the Pacific campaign in a way that could have subdued Japan with less destruction? Or was the relationship already too eroded and tensions already too high due to the Manhattan Project? All of these things you think these things are like set in stone, but all of these things hung on the balance of the edge of a knife. You know what I mean? It's like America's decision to be more protectionist with the USSR because they became afraid of their might, rather than forging a long-lasting alliance with that country due to our mutual interest, could have changed the face of the next fucking 100 years, right?
Well, remember, even back then, America was run by big business. And when big business looks at something like what's going on in the Soviet Union at that time and like
we don't
communism and shit, they're just like, No.
And think about
this is not an ally.
Think about the hidden cost of dropping these bombs, not just the destructive nature of the bombs to the populace of Japan. Setting that aside, the statement that America had made that Russia obviously felt like that they were helping America as equals in this war. And I don't think anybody would argue that technology aside, American military technology might have been slightly better, but the Russians were every bit as instrumental, if not more instrumental, in taking down the Nazis and breaking the back of the Axis.
If the Soviet Union was not,
it was a meat grinder.
So think about you're in that position in the Soviet Union, right? And then you learn that the United States has this weapon that can evaporate a city.
It set up an arms race that fucking is still going on to this day. So.
I mean, look, all the Soviets at the time were researching this technology as well. I mean, the Germans were kind of like, they were nascent in it. They were kind of like, what is this?
They were late to the party on that.
They were too late. And of course, the Soviet Union would I'm sure that through intel, they knew what was going on to some degree. Now the details of the Manhattan Project, I think were revealed to them. Maybe not every single one, but a lot of them. I know I did end up the Soviet Union because they had an excellent spy network in the U.S. I mean, we spied over there, of course, as well. But they found out about these projects, which were super top secret. And as far as the development of the bomb, I think it was like in that time was like $35 billion. It was an insane amount of money to actually build these things.
I mean, there was not a lot of political will after the meat grinder that was World War II. And then, of course, remember that World War II was generationally on the heels of World War I, which was another epic meat grinder of a fucking war, right?
There was probably a huge war fatigue at this point.
Right.
Where
and so
no one's really wanting to go to fight another war.
Think about it. At this time, right, the Japanese were the last of the Axis powers to fall and surrender.
Yes.
Other smaller Axis powers like Finland and, all of Croatia, they'd already just given up, waved the white flag, but Japan remained obstinate.
Italy, all these places are already.
Without the political will for an invasion that very well could have killed 1 million American soldiers or more, and with knowing the obstinance of the Japanese, could they have fought America to some kind of forced political stalemate and developed completely differently as a society as a result of that what you would call a military victory, right?
No, Japan. I mean, the history of Japan would be radically transformed if the bomb had never been dropped on them.
And think about what they might be as a global force in technology, military technology, all of this stuff. They're already.
Even with that,
with what happened to them, exactly, Scotty. I'm sorry, I'll let you say it.
I mean, look, if you look at Japan's demographics, now it's a totally different story. Now they have a declining population. But after World War II, I mean, there was a baby boom there. And in Japan, I mean, they had huge companies like Sony. It's still a powerhouse. Was like Toshiba. There's a bunch of these major companies that for everyday products Japan was really the technology center of the world until about, the 90s. 2000s, that when things maybe started shifting a little bit more to China and some other places.
We talk all the time about how much debt U.S. debt China holds, but Japan is actually the top holder of U.S. debt. So the fact that the small little island of Japan is as powerful as it is, even after what happened at Hiroshima and Nagasaki,
right?
I mean, it's like.
Think about this too.
Without that event, I mean, just the persistence they had and the technology they have.
Well, it's part of their culture. It's a part of the adaptability that Japan had. They're like, okay, it's America now, and they just went all in on that, and that's that style of capitalism, and they were just really successful at it.
Here's another angle.
In a generation.
Here's another political angle on this to think about too. So after shutting down Jewish concentration camps, would the world have been more critical of the U.S. for their Japanese internment camps and less likely to be allied with the U.S. as a result should Japan have not surrendered? Think about this. So there was an internment camp right near where I grew up, right near Fresno. Yeah. And would that be looked at less as kind of a foible in war and more of like a war crime if the Japanese weren't so cowed by that nuclear defeat that they allowed American troops to create giant military bases and made an unconditional surrender. So think about this stalemate thing and think about the blemish that would have given the U.S. having all of these American citizens locked in these functionally concentration camps for race after just, using the pretext of those concentration camps with the American people and the international community to enter into the war in Europe, right?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, the Japanese internment camps are definitely easily one of the most fucked up things our country's ever done.
I mean, yeah.
I mean, like,
no shadow of a doubt.
I mean, it's like beyond fucking. I mean, like, especially when you actually look at like the conditions and stuff and like the suffering that it caused.
Yep.
And just like the pretext for it being so fucking because like. We didn't do that to like German Americans. We weren't like, you have dual loyalty to the camp with you.
It was obviously racist.
So there was like, like a huge racial component to it, obviously, too. Yeah.
So this is actually an airborne picture of the concentration camp that I talked about that was built near my hometowns, the Fresno Assembly Center. And I don't know how many families were kept here, but it looks like it probably bungalowed, 100 families or so.
I mean, if you really think about it, I mean, the atom bomb is what's fucking really solidified the American hegemony. I mean, really it did, because you're right. If Japan doesn't fall into line, like when Japan fell into line, imagine that. That's like the most tough, like no fucking give up, no surrender culture. And you got them to surrender to you. You got them to give up. That sends a big statement. But if you don't have that, absent that, like we might have been, instead of Vietnam in the 70s, it might have been fucking fighting Japan again in the 70s. We don't really know what Japan would have done.
And it allows us to walk back the trajectory of this shit, right? Oh, we're sorry. Tear down the camps before it becomes a big international stink. But what do you do with all of these Japanese people that you have in camps if Japan says fuck you and you don't have the bomb or the will to use it, right?
Yeah.
And they fight you to a stalemate. Then what do you do with all these American people that are still sitting in camps?
Probably mass deportations.
So you think they'd all have been just sent back to Japan?
Probably.
Wow.
Because what else would they have done with them? I mean, if there's a stalemate, that probably would have been part of the accord. Like all Japanese citizens are allowed to leave America, but they have to, and then they have to leave America. It's like, nope, they got to get out of here.
And wouldn't or we
think
just
about that Nazi and fuck, or just
exactly.
Or we go find a solution.
Start fucking genociding Japanese people.
Just think about that though. In the wake of defeating the Nazis used that same rhetoric. Juden, out. Or Alf. You know what I mean? They would get out of the cities, go to Poland, get the fuck out of our land. And then they invaded Poland. They're like, get the fuck out of here too. You know what I mean? It was all about kicking these racial minorities out. Or, well, it really wasn't all about that, but that was part of the fucking doctrine, right? And
I mean, most of the early rhetoric of the Nazis was about, like, we got to get them out of here. We got to get them out of here. But then it became like, it actually costs way more to fucking keep kicking them out than it does to just kind of like solve the problem.
Well, here's the thing.
Final solution.
I mean, if I honestly feel like it just would have been World War III, or it would have been war between the U.S. and Japan, because Germany was defeated in World War I and basically stewed on it for fucking 20 plus years. Okay, we're fucking pissed. We got to pay all these reparations and the shit. Fuck this. They come back with the fucking Third Reich. Japan and in the same position, like you beat Japan to his like, look, it's a draw. We're gonna sign a fucking ceasefire or treaty or whatever. Japan loses most of its territory, but it gets to keep its principal, islands and stuff. Like, it's going to go right back to where it was at before. It's going to keep building it up.
Think about an imperialistic, militarily empowered Japan against China before the buildup.
Yeah.
Think about them colonizing China and becoming a massive world power.
Oh yeah, they did. Which they definitely.
They attempted. But think about
they invaded China several times. So.
Think about their ability and impetus to do that. Had America not established bases all over the country and functionally demilitarized it after World War II.
It's crazy because we actually might have ended up allied with the Soviet Union if Japan was like that. Still,
Thinking about these little fucking razor thin marginal decisions that have happened in history and the political decisions. You're right. You see how history could have taken a totally different course if just a few people in power had made a slightly different decision, right? So
of course, yeah.
Super interesting. But you know what, guys? Here to end, we don't have much time left, but we still have one very important thing to cover.
Okay.
The final hypothetical. What if TJ Kirk had taken the RV trip around America? So I have a little bit of background on this. Okay. In 2007, 2008, famous YouTube atheist and star Thomas James Kirk III made a promise to his burgeoning and passionate audience to make a RV trip around America. This piece of content promised to be one of the most innovative and one of the most look forward to pieces of commentary and content in the young burgeoning atheist movement on YouTube. But yet it never materialized. I ask you, gentlemen, what would have happened had TJ Kirk actually traveled around America talking to prominent atheists and theists back in 2008?
I can tell you exactly what would have happened, Paul.
Scotty knows.
It's going to pain me to say this to you because you're right here, but it's a show. We got to be professional about this. TJ would be sitting somewhere like probably Austin, Texas. He'd be basically just take Joe Rogan, swap him out to TJ. TJ gets $100 million Spotify deal. TJ is sitting there on top right now. He's interviewing the biggest celebrities. People are banging on his door. I'm basically TJ's fucking court jester. Like, Scotty, fetch me a loaf of bread. Like, yes, TJ, I'll get you a loaf of bread right away. I bring him his loaf of bread. I didn't ask for bread. I asked for mayonnaise. You'd be living in a fucking giant mansion, TJ. You'd have a fucking throne of power built up. Would he be
like Dark Future Biff?
Oh, yeah. God, yeah,
dude.
Oh,
man, that'd be so sweet.
TJ have a thing in his house where he walks in. And there'd be something implanted in his body where only when he would walk in, the house would react totally differently.
Every time I've ever watched Back to the Future 2 and seen Dark Future Biff, I've always been like, man, I wish I could be Dark Future Biff. You know what I mean?
Who hasn't thought that at least once?
He's got a casino. All of his enemies have been defeated. He's got fucking his little thugs that do whatever he wants. He just fucking sits around watching movies in a hot tub with hot bitches.
You know what you would have done with that money you got from all these advertising and Spotify deals and shit, TJ?
I would have Dark Future biffed it up. What are you talking about?
You would have opened your first casino.
Yeah.
First going to be opening right now on the strip in Las Vegas, TJ.
Yeah.
You'd be cutting the ribbon. It's good to be TJ. I tell you what, I'm glad I took that RV trip around America.
It'd be called TJ's Palace. It'd be awesome.
And like this whole local area that's all fucking whatever it is now it'd all be fucking biker gangs and meth.
There'd be like a giant statue of you doing something that's like splendid.
But I'd destroy the economy of the local area and shit.
You had it right in your fingertips, TJ. I have nothing more to add to that. I think Scotty fucking cleared that fucking hypothetical right up.
No, I as soon as I heard the hypothetical, I'm like, Scotty's going to have to be the one to answer this because he's going to know better than anybody.
He did.
So I didn't know that. You know what? I thought he was going to say. I thought he was going to be like, he was going to go through this thing of like how it would have been a terrible failure and all this, but he did me worse. He fucking was like, no, that would have actually everything in your life would be 20,000 times more amazing if you'd done it, but you didn't do it. So you lost out. You're a loser, TJ. You're a loser. You always will be. There's no way to set it right now.
Now go eat a fucking McRib or something, you fucking pleb.
That's what I got for you.
I'm going to go slip my wrist. Bye.
Deep Bad Pride. Deep Bad Pride.